to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone.
That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives by this point of pale light.
We shall prevail.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility, we copy you on the ground.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to the Internet Space Program.
GM, everybody, how's it going? We got a great town hall today. GM Pablo, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, we're excited to have Alan Stern back on the MoonDAO Live podcast, YouTube live stream here this week. We actually had Alan on almost a year ago, exactly. So we're excited to have this conversation with Alan today, led by none other than Frank White, the godfather of the overview effect. So really excited for that conversation and all that entails. But before we do get to that, our main event, we did want to provide a few little updates from the MoonDAO network, MoonDAO ecosystem, things that are going on here, just to get everybody up to speed. So yeah, a lot of activity in the network. We welcomed in quite a few new citizens over the past week. We're up to 240 citizens now within the Space Acceleration Network. Big shout out to Cosmic Peaks and Ananda and Tony and Avery. And actually there were a couple more people that just joined right before I put together this presentation. So we also got in Spaceman Sam and Rodrigo from Brazil and Boston, also up there in your neck of the woods, Frank. So you'll have to connect in the near future. A little featured bit here for Ananda. She's based down there in Rio de Janeiro. We actually met up with her during our time at Rio Innovation Week in the Space Industry Workshop. So really cool to welcome one of those new connections into the MoonDAO network. I think we're up to 12 citizens now within Brazil and yeah, 240 around the world. Really cool just to see what people are working on. Ananda's a science communicator, space influencer, does a lot of great content, well, in Portuguese, but on her YouTube channel with quite a large reach on astronomy content. So really cool to see the passion for the space community down there as well, and people doing great work.
Yeah, what I found really interesting in Brazil was that there's quite a lot of people that were science communicators that were at the conference that we went to in Rio. And it's awesome to see kind of a community of different creators and their approaches, I guess, to bringing all of the space world down to the rest of the world. So
down to Earth, yeah, spreading that knowledge about. There's a lot of like citizen science and asteroid hunters, and yes, science communicators, people that follow all the developments with SpaceX and the rocket launches. A lot of people that are really passionate and want to go to space. I guess there's not been a first woman astronaut from Brazil, so there's a lot of people that are also kind of striving to fill that spot, I guess, if you will. But yeah, big welcome to our new citizens and Ananda in particular.
Yeah, and Sam didn't make it on the presentation, but I met him at New Worlds, and people should check out his book. He's got a bunch of different sort of inventions that creature comforts in space, and some of them are quite interesting, things that you wouldn't really think of, like taking a sip of water out of a glass. How would you do that in microgravity?
Right. Or in Creature Comforts of Space or something like that is his book, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, people should check it out. It's pretty cool.
Your audio is a bit low, Pablo, on my end, and I guess Bob is saying that as well. I don't know if your mic's a bit far away, but just FYI. Yeah, some community contributions here. Well, speaking of Spaceman Sam, I guess huge shout out to Spaceman Sam for his generous contribution of $111 here just today, right before this town hall, to help send Frank to space. Like, that mission is still alive. We're working hard, trying to rally a global community of people to help support this mission to send Frank to space. So yeah, big thanks to Sam. And yeah, as a result, if you do donate, if you're not a citizen and you donate over $100, you can also become a citizen for free. So yeah, Sam hopped in right after that, so it's great to see him tied into the network there. And it also makes him eligible to compete to fly alongside Frank. So as a reminder, we're not just trying to send Frank, we're also trying to send a community member to space alongside him or to near space on a stratospheric balloon. And yeah, citizens are eligible to compete to be part of the candidate pool that will, eventually be decided who flies alongside him.
Yeah. Rally your friends, tell them to support you in your candidacy to go to space and get on the leaderboard. So that's what this is for. It's for people to reach out to their kind of support groups and be like, hey, I've got an opportunity to go to space. Can you guys support me? And then they can back you.
I think a few of the new citizens are actually coming through that way as well from Austin. I know a couple of Austin's friends or acquaintances have joined recently to kind of support Austin's effort to go to space. So really cool. But yeah, also community contributions. I know Rosanna Zen is in Turkey at Space Camp Turkey right now with Chris Sembrowski, submitted that as a community contribution here in the MoonDAO network. If you're doing any space work, any independent space work, whatever it might be, you can just hop in as a citizen in the dashboard and submit your work, get more eyeballs on it, spread the word about what you're doing, but also eventually get rewarded. Oh, we got Spaceman Sam here. Yeah. Howdy, Sam. Welcome to the network. Thank you, Sam, for the contribution to Frank's campaign. But yeah, 10 active projects. Last week we did a good town hall update from all of our active projects, including five new projects that shared kind of what they're going to be working on here this quarter and what's coming up. So, if you're looking for a way to get involved in a space project part-time, whatever it might be, check out last week's town hall, see how you might be able to help, raise your hand and start getting to work on one of these smaller projects that, you might be able to lend a hand with in numerous ways. We got dev projects, we've got more hardware prototyping projects, we've got STEM outreach projects. It really runs the gamut of kind of the offerings that are out there that you could help get involved with. And one last call out here. We won't go into it. You can check out the Discord channel, but the nominations for MoonDAO's third executive lead seat are still open, and the deadline will be here on August 24th. So basically, Monday, end of day. If you or someone you would think would be a good executive lead to help steer this ship at MoonDAO, help guide us into our ultimate missions and goals, get that nomination in here over the weekend or by Monday at the latest, and we'll take it from there. Elections will be happening. We'll have a town hall with the candidates, and then we'll have the actual voting process here in mid-September.
Yeah. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to Ryan or myself to learn more about what the role entails, and what you're signing up for if you're running. So yeah, we've already had meetings with a few different people, and yeah, we encourage anyone who's interested to just learn more. So reach out.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a full-time position. We're willing to scale with the person's availability too. Like it's a part-time role, more advisory, governance, strategic role. That's perfectly acceptable as well. And just kind of make that clear during the nomination process as you put your candidacy forward, put someone else forward.
Your audio is still low for some reason. No clue what's going on there. I haven't changed anything, but
we can hear you just a little low there. So yeah, not sure what's going on. Yeah, a couple final things. Autograph book is still available for sale. As a reminder, Iman's launching his book, A Heart for Space, on August 25th. So coming up really quick. You can purchase it in the marketplace at cost with some extra signed photos and patches and things like that. Inspired 24 has a spaceflight training class coming up in January for $1,000 out of Houston. And Habitat Marte is also looking for, they have a call for speakers for their space analog virtual conference that's happening in November. So lots of different opportunities in the marketplace and on the jobs board. And yeah, today we've got Alan Stern, as we mentioned. We're going to have Iman Jahangir, a Heart for Space book launch event next week, same time, same place, and then Sharon Hagel 2 weeks from now. So a lot of really cool conversations coming up, including today's. New videos on the platform. Austin put together a great video about the Space Camp USA Alumni Hall of Fame weekend. Check that out. Active Project Showcase we already talked about. But yeah, that's essentially it for updates from the network. Anything we missed, Pablo, comes to mind?
I doubled my mic audio. Hopefully, I'm coming through a little louder.
Yeah, I can
So,
hear you better now.
okay. All right. Yeah. Not. I know. I think you pretty much covered it, Ryan. Yeah. We've got some exciting stuff, like always. That's kind of sitting there in the background, but kind of hoping to get some big updates to the community soon. So.
Yeah.
I always have to leave off with a little teaser, little seed of big things are in the works, but hopefully we really want to share them with the community soon, and we will. So.
Lots of things cooking, not as if we got like 10 active projects going on, this campaign to send Frank to space, and then also all these other things that Pablo's, alluding to that we'll be sharing with y'all pretty soon. So, but yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you are watching, do be sure to, give a like, give a share, help spread the word, just to get more eyeballs on this conversation between Frank and Alan. That's always really welcome and appreciated. But yeah, we'll turn it over here to Alan and Frank. Frank obviously is the author of The Overview Effect. Anyone who's tuned in before has seen Frank with us many times now, many amazing conversations over the past couple months, of course. But Dr. Alan Stern
doesn't need any introduction, especially in a MoonDAO town hall, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. I know. We got his picture here. I just felt I had to give him a quick intro. Maybe we got some new faces here. So, but yeah. And Dr. Alan Stern also really needs no introduction, but he's an incredible planetary scientist, one of the most accomplished planetary scientists alive today. He led the New Horizons mission, which gave us the first kind of close look at Pluto, and continues operating out into the Kuiper Belt. Served as the chief of the NASA Space and Earth Science programs. Has also flown to space himself as a researcher on Virgin Galactic's Galactic 5 mission. So, yeah, has done a lot of amazing adventures too, going in a submersible down to the Titanic, and multiple books and many scientific papers. And yeah, we're just real honored to have Alan here and to have this conversation with Frank as well. So,
yeah. And a repeat guest.
Yeah. 1 year later. Great to have Alan back. And yeah, we'll bring Frank and Alan up on stage. Hey, gentlemen.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Yeah, we'll turn things over to you here, but I guess also for the audience, if you have questions throughout the conversation, feel free to type them in the chat, and we'll circle back to those towards the end. So, cool.
Great.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay, guys. Hi, Alan. Thanks for joining us. Really great to see you again.
Hey, Frank. Howdy.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of kick things off by talking about some of your accomplishments. I think it's amazing when I think about what you've done. The whole New Horizons project and other aspects of your life. I'd like to get into that a little bit, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about, I'd like to get your advice on why you're supporting my flight, and some helpful hints you can give me. But let's start with you. I read your book about New Horizons, and I didn't know you then. I kept thinking, what motivated Alan Stern to keep pushing this? I don't think those of us who are not planetary scientists, we don't know how complicated it is to get a mission. We don't know how many barriers there can be. And you had a lot. Why did you want to do the mission? What did you run into as challenges, and why did you keep going? What was driving you and motivating you for that?
Let me recount that for you, but let me also say that space flight's a team sport, and this would have never gotten done if it was just me pushing for it. Right. It was a team of 2,500 men and women, but also support of not only the larger planetary science community in the United States, but also the very first planetary decadal that was conducted by the National Academies of Sciences. This is the highest priority new start for NASA planetary science in the decade of the 2000s. So a lot of people get credit for making this happen. And it took a lot of work and a lot of what I would call doggedness, just staying after it, because Um, even after we got the go, we got canceled. I used to say that we had so many ups and downs that if New Horizons had been a cat, it would have been dead long ago, because cats only get 9 lives, and New Horizons had more near-death experiences than that.
Yeah.
For me, at heart, I'm an explorer, and it's what fascinated me and enthralled me about space exploration from the time I was a little boy. And the idea that we had done this amazing job in the United States and NASA of being the first to explore every planet in the solar system, all the way from Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, all the way out to Neptune, where the Voyager mission culminated, and had this unfinished business with Pluto of completing the reconnaissance of the solar system as we knew it at the time that the space age began, and what we used to call the classical planets. And then, of course, scientifically, we realized even by the late 1980s, when I was first getting involved, that Pluto was not just this oddball that didn't fit the pattern of not being like the terrestrial planets and not being like the giant planets, but it was really the harbinger of a whole new population of small planets that are in the Kuiper Belt, of which we now know about a dozen. And it was the combination of the unfinished business of exploration, completing that reconnaissance of the solar system, and the scientific prize of being first mission to a whole new class of planet that together was just an irresistible cocktail or combination for me that I didn't want to let go of.
That's a great explanation, and I hadn't really thought of that there was something incomplete, you wanted to complete it. And also Pluto has turned out to be a fascinating planet. I know there's a controversy about what it is. It's a fascinating celestial body, isn't it?
It's a fascinating planet. You don't even need air quotes.
Okay. I'm with you on that. And I hear Jarek Isaacman is on his soapbox about
well,
that.
let me just say a word about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No?
There are lots of ways to test for planethood, and there are all kinds of different algorithms. But I think my favorite is something I call the Star Trek test. It's real simple. If you saw a given object on the viewfinder on the bridge of the Enterprise, would you call it a planet? Would you say they're there to visit a planet, or are they visiting an alien spacecraft or an asteroid or a comet or a star or a Death Star or what have you, right? And I claim that if Pluto were to be on that viewfinder, everybody in the audience would instantly know, oh, there is some strange planet this week. It's that simple.
There you go. Yeah. It's I think that's why a lot of people who are not scientists, they're not part of the community of scientists, it's just like, well, of course it's a planet. It's obvious. It is.
And it's also true in the scientific community. In fact, this a planetary scientist named Phil Metzger down in Florida used machine learning to read over 18,000 scientific papers written since 2006, when the IAU took its vote. He found no examples of scientific papers that use the IAU definition. It's just unworkable. It's flawed, and nobody uses it. It's really irrelevant.
Well, speaking of Jared Isaacman, he flies jet planes as well as being an astronaut, and he's not a scientist, but he is an NASA administrator. So, one thing I found interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you fly jet planes too, don't you?
I am a private pilot, flight instructor, instrument rated, and a glider pilot. And I have done work flying in NASA F-18s, NASA WB-57s that are kind of like a U-2, and a significant number of other high-performance aircraft as a backseater doing research astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not actually a pilot of any of those airplanes, only general aviation.
But you've flown in them.
Many times, yeah. For many years.
What is that like? I mean, that is really you go pretty high in in the sky, and you go pretty fast. What is it like?
High, it's fast. It's a thrilling experience all around.
Yeah.
I got involved in that in the late 1990s. Originally flying some experiment missions to look at Comet Hale-Bopp out of Ellington Air Force Base in Houston on these WB-57 Canberras, and then migrated over to F-18 Hornets flying out of Edwards Air Force Base. Took a lot of training to fly both those aircraft, and went to ejection seat school and water survival school and so forth and so on. It's one of the highlights of my career were the many flights over the many years that I was doing that kind of work. And I would say if any of you ever get a chance to even have a joyride in an aircraft like that, much less to be a required crew member, go do it. It's thrilling. It's a very different way of looking at the world than from an airliner. Of course, the accelerations equal for me the views. I got a fair amount of time getting to actually fly the airplanes and doing aerobatics and other things that weren't strictly part of what we were doing on the research missions, but the pilots would want to kind of show me what the airplane could do. And later I ended up flying F-104s, as they're called, Widowmakers, for G training in preparation for suborbital spaceflight. And that was a lot of fun too.
It sounds exciting. And you did get a view of the Earth from a distance, kind of a early kind of overview effect, right?
You do. The WB or the WB-57 was the highest I ever flew in an airplane, only up at about 55,000 feet. But even at that altitude, you could not see the curvature of the Earth. I tried. I couldn't discern anything. But what I could tell was that when you look straight up at those altitudes, that the sky was dramatically darker overhead than what you see from an airliner. So you're beginning to see what ultimately opens up to be the wild black yonder when you really get up to space altitudes.
Well, on another note, you're one of the only people I know who's been in outer space and has gone down pretty deep into the ocean. You did go to the Titanic. That was one of the first things you told me about the first time you and I had a long talk. Talk a little bit about that trip. What did it feel like? What struck you about it? I mean, it's a fascinating story of a supposedly unsinkable ship, which, as we all know, it did sink, and it's there. And if you have a submersible, you can go see it. When did you do that, and what was it like for that, to do that?
Well, I went in 2022, in July of 2022, on the submersible Titan that was lost a year later. We were actually not the last dive of the Titan before the accident, but the last dive to the Titanic.
Yeah.
And it had not been a life goal of mine like spaceflight was. It was something that came up very suddenly early in 2022, and I was able to be a part of an expedition. The company that was sponsoring the expeditions made me the mission scientist, and I had certain objectives in terms of documenting the archaeology of the wreck and studying some of the undersea flora and fauna down at those great depths, more than 12,000 feet below the North Atlantic. And you know, I thought it'd be really interesting to see what undersea technology is all about, and to see the Titanic with my own eyes. And all that came true, and it was fabulous to spend a week parked above the Titanic, you know, anchored on the mothership, and to do a dive that took 12 hours from the time we entered the vehicle till we left. But what I didn't anticipate was how emotionally impacted I was by being down there.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the photic zone, the portion of the oceans that light can penetrate only goes about 1,000 feet deep. This is more than an order of magnitude deeper. It's completely plunged in darkness, and the only light is the light from the floodlights on the ship, on the submersible. So in a real sense, the Titanic is really entombed down there with that darkness and the cold temperature of the water. And of course, the seawater rusts the Titanic, and it's causing structural failure, and the decks are collapsing over the decades. And you can see that visually. And anybody that goes to a website about Titanic that has modern views, you can see that many of the decks have collapsed, and it's expected to more or less end up just being a heap in a few more decades. It won't be recognizable as the Titanic. But more than that, as we drove around the debris field, which is, many hundreds of meters in each direction around the actual ship, and the bow and the stern sit a few hundred meters apart themselves, because the ship broke apart on the surface, and the two individual pieces fell separately and were carried slightly different locations by the currents. But down there, you see lots and lots of artifacts, things that either were detonated out of the Titanic when the boilers were blowing up underwater during the plunge. And you see lots of things that just spilled out from the open gaping wounds of the two sides of the ship. So furniture, dinnerware, lots and lots of pieces of mangled metal that were hurt in these explosions. The most touching thing that I saw down there was a little porcelain coffee cup that was sitting perfectly upright, not buried in sand, and just sitting there as if somebody had perched it on the ocean bottom. And it sure made me think about all the people that lost their lives, many of them unfairly, because in the society of 1912, those who had the more expensive tickets were first to get to the lifeboats. And of course, a lot of families were lost, and a lot of children and a lot of crew members. And I was emotionally impacted by that, in that it really felt like I was, in a sense, among them. And even when I came back, it gave me an appreciation for the humanity and the tragedy of it that I had not appreciated from seeing movies and documentaries. But seeing it for real and for myself sure made me think about that a lot.
Yeah, and those people, they weren't test pilots. They weren't astronauts. They weren't planning to risk their lives.
They're just passengers on a routine, transatlantic voyage. A lot of them making a trip, and some of them making a one-way to immigrate to the United States.
Sure. But it must have been a double dose for you when the Titan went down. Then you had been on that submersible, and you probably knew people who were on it. Can you talk about that?
Sure. The accident that in which the crew and the vehicle were lost was about 11 months after our dive to the Titanic. It was the very next dive to the Titanic, and the vehicle was lost a few hundred meters above the wreck. And of course, we knew, and we were briefed on the fact that implosion and many other risks were out there. We had to sign release agreements that stated many stark ways that you could get killed on this thing or get hurt. And so when I first heard that all communications had been lost, I thought it probably imploded, because there's so many different ways to communicate, redundant ways and completely independent ways to communicate from that vehicle. I believe there were 5 separate ways you could communicate. And, for all of them to be cut off, to me meant something very sudden and very serious had happened. And a few days later, of course, it was revealed that is what happened. And I knew 2 of the people who lost their lives. They had both been on the expedition that I was on. Nargeolet, who's I believe the person that had made the most dives to the Titanic, had been on our expedition. Although he's not on the dive, he was on the surface ship, and acted as a advisor to the company. And then our pilot, who was also the CEO of the company, lost his life on that. So that was very impactful. I think to all of us who had made the dive 11 months before. We've talked about it together quite a bit.
Yeah.
We're fortunate that that our dive was uneventful,
Yeah.
and it was just a great experience, and some science came out of it. And I often think about how long it will be until there's another submersible that can go back to the Titanic and bring people for research or for adventure reasons. I'm sure it'll happen again, but it's going to be some years.
So, so interesting. I think what I'm hearing is that you have taken the fact that you're a scientist, and that has been the core of many of the things you've done. Am I right? I mean,
it's my line of work.
Yeah, but you could be a planetary scientist without some of the things you've done. And in other words, I think there's a variety of experiences that your science has given you, right?
Yeah, and that's probably a product of who I am and what I've wanted to do. There are a lot of planetary scientists that aren't interested in things like that on the exploration side. There are also a lot who fly on zero-G airplanes to do research. There are others who have been involved in Antarctic expeditions, for example, polar expeditions, some deep sea work. I'm not alone in that. Maybe I've done more of it than many of them, but I'm certainly not alone. And I believe there are in the world a little bit less than 10 people who've both been to space and to the Titanic.
Really?
And very fortunate to be at the intersection of both those groups.
Yeah. Did you ever want to climb Mount Everest?
No interest. None. I live in Colorado, and I've climbed 14ers, and I like mountain climbing, non-technical mountain climbing. This will sound strange to you, but I have a bit of a fear of heights. It doesn't concern me to be in an airplane or a spacecraft. It doesn't concern me even to parachute or paraglide. I've done a lot of that. But I don't like open ledges. For example, I don't like getting on a roof just to clean the gutters. That's only 12 feet up. So I'm not interested in technical mountain climbing. A lot of people are. I do like recreational mountain climbing. But Everest has never been on my bucket list in any form. Probably never will be.
I'm fascinated with Everest. I've read a lot about it, studied it. I'm not going to do it. I know I can't do it physically right now at this point in time, but I'm very interested in it. And I think it has a certain comparison to commercial spaceflight in the sense that the people who are going on Everest now save up for it. They prepare to some degree or other for it. Some don't prepare enough and they don't come back. But it's a really interesting parallel for me.
Yeah, and just like spaceflight, some people who are perfectly well prepared enough get killed for reasons beyond their control, like the weather, or stepping into a hidden crevasse and they disappear into that. If you ever read John Krakauer's book about Into Thin Air, the near tragedy and their partial tragedy, because some people did lose their lives in an expedition in, I believe it was May of 1996. Sometimes your number's just up, and it's not your fault. I don't think any amount of training with the technology they had then would have really substantially changed the outcome. It's a very dangerous pursuit, more so than space flight. We know that about 1% of the people who've flown in space got killed doing that, whereas the statistics for Everest are closer to 10%.
Yeah. I interviewed Scott Parazynski for my book, and I asked him what was more frightening or dangerous to him. Oh, Everest. Everest. He said, I felt I was in danger the whole time.
And for reference, Scott, for anybody that doesn't know, I think he's a 5-time shuttle flyer. And did some pretty dangerous extravehicular activities. In addition to that, he did dive to the Titanic on the Titan a year or two before I did. So he's done a lot of things that many people would consider to be on the riskier side.
Yeah.
He tried to climb Everest and didn't succeed, but was so driven that he went back a couple of years later and did succeed.
Yeah.
And has written about that, and it's well worth the read.
Yeah. I know that's another part of his Everest story that's interesting. He was close to the summit, but he had back problems, I think. And he was smart enough not to push himself. But he did go back, which is fascinating.
And he succeeded on the second try.
You did, yeah. What you said you'd always wanted to fly in space. So tell us about your space flight. It was on Virgin Galactic. It was a research flight.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me that you didn't have much time to look out the window because you were doing research. And also, I guess we can tell the audience that I did ask to go with you, and you said no because you would just be looking out the window. But yeah, we were both joking. But anyway, what was that like, and how did that happen? How did you get to do that?
Well, as I said, I wanted to fly in space since I was very young, and I tried to get enough experience at different things to make myself competitive to get hired by NASA to do that for a living. And I got very close. I got all the way to the final interviews, passed all the physicals and all the psychological exams, but I wasn't selected. I applied many times, never got selected. And I did all that flying and became a paramedic and did a PhD in astrophysics and did a number of other things to prepare myself for it. But a lot of qualified people are there, and NASA picks. I did not get selected. Twice I worked to become a payload specialist on the space shuttle, and was selected one of those times. But later that flight changed its objectives, and what I was doing got axed, and so I didn't get to fly on the shuttle.
Wow, I didn't know that.
After I led science for NASA at NASA headquarters in the late 2000s, when I went to my firm, where I am now, the Southwest Research Institute, which is a very large nonprofit R&D house based in San Antonio, Texas. And when we were negotiating to bring me back there for a second stint after my time at NASA headquarters, I said that I wanted to start a commercial suborbital program that would fly Southwest Research researchers on Virgin Galactic and other available space lines when they were ready. And the Institute is very farsighted, and I had to write a proposal, but it made a case that there's going to be a lot more of this in the future, and that we should get to the front of that line. And so the Institute invested its own money to develop that program and buy some seats for us to fly some initial missions to get experience at it, so that we'd be more competitive in proposing for higher research flights for NASA and other entities. And so we started that program in 2010. It took a long time for the vehicles to be ready. They only became operational in the middle of 2021. My flight was on Galactic 05 in 2023, my first flight. I'll now be flying again early in 2027 on Virgin, but this time on a NASA mission, which we wrote a proposal. And the very first time that NASA said we're ready to pay for researchers to fly with their experiments, if you can meet certain criteria to prove that a researcher needs to come along, not just to come to look out the window, but to make this experiment succeed, or to be able to do this all at lower cost than it would take to automate it. And we wrote a proposal to that very first call, and we were the only ones selected. I'm very proud of that.
Okay.
And that's the experiment that I'll be doing, an astronomy experiment, early next year. And that's co-sponsored by my employer, the Southwest Research Institute, and NASA. And looking forward to going back, and hopefully going back more after that, because it really turns out that putting the human in the loop is a much simpler and generally more reliable way of doing things than automation. It costs less time and money. You know, I like to say that if automation was so great, every university lab, every corporate laboratory, from big pharma to astrophysics to chemistry, everything would be automated if automation was so great. But it's not, because we know that humans make it easier and they're more adaptable as the data is coming in to make the experiments successful. And I know that others have been selected now by NASA to fly. Dr. Stephen Collicutt at Purdue is one good example. He's a microgravity researcher who was the second person selected to do this for NASA. And I think it's going to be the finger out of the dike and large numbers of researchers flying, first suborbitally and then orbitally. And I'm quite sure that planetary scientists and others will fly research missions to the moon in the 2030s, unless something very unexpected happens.
Alan, I didn't know you had applied so many times to NASA. That's really kudos to you for not giving up. And that is kind of a story of so many people.
It is.
You know, Iman Jahangir, who was sponsored by MoonDAO, he applied many times. I don't think he's stopped applying to NASA. He flew on Blue Origin. Cyan Proctor, actually, she and Iman were in the same cohort that almost made it, I think in 2009, something like that. And of course,
many astronauts who have flown will tell you they applied quite a number of times. Some people got lucky and they got in the first try. But, you know, look at Jose Hernandez and how many times he had to apply. Watch the movie that was made about his all of his applications and his getting to actually live his dream and be a NASA astronaut.
So when you got to do it, and I guess it was really your 2027 flight that I jokingly applied to go with you, not the earlier one, but what was it? What you hoped for?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
On kind of every dimension of it.
Yeah.
We had 9 quantitative objectives to accomplish on that flight. We considered 6 of them to be what we call the minimum success criteria to do all 6. And then there were 2 more to get to full mission success, and 1 that we called a get ahead objective for the second flight. And actually all 9 got done. So that's a perfect score. And I didn't think we would get there, even though trained a lot. You know, it's a brand new environment to be riding a rocket. It wasn't new for me to be in microgravity because I'd flown on zero-G aircraft a lot. But I had not been on a spacecraft that, for example, will pivot around you while you're flying through the cabin. So if you take off for some location and the vehicle's turning, you end up at a different location because it's turning around you. And there was a lot of learning curve just in getting to do it the first time that I hope to apply to the second flight. There was not much chance with 9 things to do and only 4 minutes of microgravity to look out the window. I got a few glances and it was spectacular. I didn't get to really soak it in, hopefully the way that you will when you fly, if we're all successful in getting you this flight. But I can tell you the Earth is magnificent from this altitude. It's also fascinating to come back through the entry and watch as you descend into the atmosphere and you have that transition from the very blackness of space back to the blue sky and everything in between that begins with just kind of a misty gray haze around you in the 150,000 foot level, and then pretty quickly returns to being like being in a high altitude, high performance jet. Just a tremendous experience. Personally, I found the most thrilling part to be the actual rocket ride, 5.5 Gs up to space altitude. The entry was pretty rock and roll itself. Also, it was fun working with my crewmates who were other researchers and a space tourist who was there, training with them for a few days during the final training, and the cockpit cabin crew folks as well from Virgin, and made some lifelong friendships out of it. And just look back on it and say I couldn't have expected better for a first, suborbital spaceflight experience.
Yeah, I mean, it must feel great to say, okay, I did that, and now I'm going to do it again, and maybe even more times than that, because I think that makes it more like a job, more like a career, more like a continuing experience.
Well, I'm proud of the fact that I went to space paid for by a third party who expected me to accomplish certain goals, not just to satisfy my own interests. I probably would have eventually just bought a tourist ticket if I had no other way to do it. But actually be expected to carry out specific objectives on a timeline made me feel much more like a person who was sent to space to work there and accomplish them, because that's what I was, and that's what I will be on this next flight. And I will say, space flight is my experience is that doing it once doesn't get out of your system. It turns out to be addictive. You want to go fly a lot more.
Well, time for the shameless plug. I mean, that's how I want to go too. Obviously, I've always wanted to be an astronaut, and I've said before that I didn't have the right space program until I found MoonDAO, because my background, my training, my studies just never qualified me for NASA. But I want to do it just to realize that ambition, but also my work is around the overview effect, the transformative experience of spaceflight. And, like you, I guess you could say I'm looking for a third party to pay for it because they believe in it, and they believe in the value of this experience that spaceflight gives us. And I'm really happy to say that more than 20 astronauts are supporting me. I'd just like to ask, why are you supporting me? And I want to thank you, because it means a lot.
Well, 100%, Frank. How could I not? I'm supporting you for several reasons, any one of which is enough. But one is that as the person who really crystallized on the overview effect, coined the term, and made us all aware of this very important phenomena, I think you deserve to fly in space now that access is opening up. Secondly, I'm very interested to see what your reaction to it is, and how you experience the overview effect on your flight. And that's why I'm here today, is to interest those who are listening to contribute in small or large ways to the fund to fly you in space. I don't think that we want to look back as a spacefaring civilization in the 22nd century and say we had a chance to fly Frank White and he never got that chance. Right. So we somehow fouled it up as a society. And this is how we're going to do it. It's going to be by completing the raise of the funds that you need to make that space flight. And the difference between the old days and now is that if you can write the check and the check won't bounce, you're going to fly.
That's right. And I need your advice to get ready for it. As we talked about before we came on the air here, I am going to go on a zero gravity flight next week.
Good.
And is that good?
You'll love it.
Or is it just its own thing?
It's its own thing. It's a subset of all the things you experience on a space flight. But I remember my first zero gravity flights when I was a NASA summer intern as a graduate student, and they were completely transformative. It was entirely magical to me to get to experience microgravity for the first time. And I've now flown not quite, but almost 1,000 parabolas on over 24 microgravity flights. I never get tired of it. I never get sick. I'm lucky. Most people don't get sick. I don't think you will. Occasionally people do, but it's quite rare, particularly these days, because in the old days, they flew people a lot more parabolas, and people would tend to get sick after many dozens of them.
Oh, yeah.
But on the kind of flight you're going to fly, and you probably fly a dozen or maybe 20, something like that. And I think you'll just have a ball, and it'll help you get ready for space flight. I would encourage you to do other things too before you fly, like go fly on centrifuges and actually experience the Virgin Galactic launch profile a number of times, you'll be better prepared for what you have in flight, and that'll better prepare you for the few minutes you'll have up at altitude, physiologically. And the training is also part of the experience. As every NASA astronaut will tell you, if you are lucky enough to get selected to be hired by NASA to fly in space, something way north of 90% of all your time as an astronaut is going to be spent in training, not in flight. And and that's part of the whole experience is the training. So take advantage of it to have a completely well-rounded experience. There are people who, as tourists, they don't take any training except the 3 or 4 day course immediately before you fly, and that's of course all you really need. But in my book, for someone who's wanted to do it for a long time and wants to get the most out of it, you're shortchanging yourself if you don't take on the a la carte additional microgravity, centrifuge, and other training aspects that you can.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and part of making this an experiment is my colleague Christina Starr and I really would like to develop a training program for commercial astronauts so they get the most out of the experience. And I am the first test subject. We're working together to document what happens for me and what we learn from it. So it is going to be, I think, helpful in that regard.
Well, right on.
Yeah.
Go do it. I will see about participating on one of my future flights.
Yeah. Terrific. Yeah. Well, we'll include you in the experimental design if you want. That would be terrific.
I'd love to chip in. Sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if we have any questions. I don't see them. We're coming very, very close to the end here. Oh, here's a question from Lakshmi. It's a question for you, Alan. I'm working on a space project people say is too far out. Okay. What did New Horizons teach you about keeping a long shot alive that you wish you'd known at the start? That's a good question. What did you learn what did you learn?
I learned that it was a lot harder. I thought it'd be hard, but it was way harder than I thought it would be to actually get New Horizons funded and then built and launched. And one of the things I learned is that dogged persistence is really important. If you think you're doing something important, don't let anybody tell you no. And I did have people tell me no. And I had people who were people I thought very highly of, who were my elders, who told me a number of times, this is not good for your career, or you should let go of this. You're becoming sort of a Nancy one note, right, about the exploration of Pluto. And I'm very glad that I didn't. I was either too thick-headed or obstinate, because I just believed in the value of it. And it turned out to be spectacular scientifically. It really changed not just our view of Pluto, but of what small planets are all about. It changed our understanding of how active and how the engines of small planets work. And when we thought that they would be dead worlds and Pluto is anything from, far from it, it more importantly, maybe even in the science, it turned so many people on to science and exploration when we did that in 2015, and the worldwide acclamation for it and the excitement from people who had never seen anything like it because they were born long after Voyager and all those pioneering first flights to planets. So I would tell her, Lakshmi, just stick with it if you believe it, and it'll be hard and it may seem almost impossible, but if you really believe in it, go after your goal. And if you can bring other people in, teamwork's the recipe for success.
And I know Lakshmi, and she will continue, I'm sure. And I would just add to what you said. My expectation when my book, The Overview Effect, was published in 1987 was that there would be a revolution in consciousness on planet Earth. People would really appreciate spaceflight in a new way, and that it would be a bestseller, and the revolution would begin. Maybe in 1988.
Mhm.
It took 40 years. We still have a ways to go, but progress has been made. And yeah, sometimes the world has to catch up to your own dogged persistence. Yeah.
And you've been ahead of the curve,
Yeah.
in this. And we're all very fortunate to have um, been able to live in a time now where spaceflight is really opening up in
Yeah.
terms of access in ways that you could hardly imagine when you first thought about and coined the term the overview effect, right? Much bigger population of people can now access space, and that's only going to grow. We're still at the very beginning of all that.
We are. Let's see if there are any more questions. Any more questions? Oh, there they are. This is Titan. Andrew Titan Paris. A question for you, Alan. Were you surprised about how much was learned about Pluto?
Well, that's a great question. And I guess I would say I wasn't surprised in that we didn't know very much. And I knew that we would, scientists often say a given space mission is going to rewrite the textbooks. What I used to say about Pluto is that we were going to write the textbook from scratch because we knew so little. But what did surprise me was the very large number of ways that Pluto surprised us. Mm-hmm. I expected to be surprised because the history of first missions to new planets was uniformly 100%, every single one had big surprises. We didn't expect, for example, that Mars would show us all this evidence of ancient oceans and rivers, for example. Or no one expected that Mercury would be a planet that was mostly all core and really very little mantle between core and crust. We didn't expect that the Galilean satellites would be so different from one another and so active, or that Titan would have seas, or that there would be geysers on Triton, 3 billion miles from the sun. And we could go on with that list. Everywhere we went, we were surprised. And so we expected to be surprised by Pluto. But what we were most surprised about was how many surprises there were. Any one or two of which would have more than satisfied us, but there were just so many. It was almost overwhelming. I like to say the solar system saved the best for last.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I got started in this entire thing when my mother gave me a little book called Stars in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pretty good coverage of stars and galaxies and the planets. And it was good enough that it blew my mind. And I thought, wow, this is so exciting. And yet, think of how the cornucopia of new information we have that goes so far beyond what was in that little book. And it's a movable feast. I think it's incredible intellectually and emotionally. Really, it's so exciting.
100%.
Yeah. Maybe we have time for one quick question, then we'll sum up. Anything more? Cosmic Guardian wants to know, how did your adventures change your way of thinking or perception? Thank you both. Fascinating conversation. How have all the things you've done changed your way of thinking or your perception of the world?
I think in one very profound way is that I found when all of the goals, like exploring Pluto, flying in space, doing some other things, were ahead of me, it was very time consuming, very competitive in many instances, and a lot of question marks about whether we would succeed or to what extent. And now with new goals, but all of that behind me, I found myself surprised that I am just so thankful that I got to do all those things and they worked out. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about it earlier in my career that I would someday just be thankful because it did work out. But I think about that every day.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good note to close on, and I will build on it, Alan, by thanking you for your support of what I'm doing. And it's two-way. If I can support you in any way, of course. We're all in this together. That's the motto.
Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you for turning us all on to the concept of the overview effect, and for being so dogged about your persistence. You know, you will go down in spaceflight history for millennia in my book, and I can't wait to see you come back and be thankful, but also tell us all about it.
Well, and with the audience watching us now, I will take this moment to thank everyone for their support as well. I'm very grateful to have come this far, and I promise to come back and share everything with everyone once it all happens. So on that note, let's close. Thanks again, Alan. I think we'll turn it back to Pablo and Ryan.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Alan. Super amazing conversation. Loved it. Alan, any obviously folks should check out the book, Chasing New Horizons, but is there any way folks listening here today in the MoonDAO audience can follow along with your work, what you're doing, preferred platforms, things of that nature?
Yeah, well, you could find me on social media, and you can also go to a website, alanstern.space, and find out a little bit more there.
Awesome. Great. We'll put that in the comments there so folks can connect and stay connected with everything you're working on. So thanks again, Alan.
Thank you.
Frank. Right. Oops. Cool. Thank you so much, Frank. But yeah, awesome conversation. Thanks again to Alan and Frank for taking the time today. I'm kind of the opposite of Alan, I guess. I love like mountain climbing and the heights and alpinism, and then get scared about the water. But yeah. But in any case, thank you everyone for tuning in today. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and obviously tune in next week. We got some more amazing astronaut conversations coming up in the near future with Dr. Iman Jahangir next Thursday, and Sharon Hagel the week after that. And yeah.
So a big reason we're doing all these talks is to continue to promote Frank's flight, so Frank can experience the overview effect directly. We have a leaderboard with people that are backing Frank's flight, and if you're in the top 25 for the leaderboard, you get to compete for the open seat. So just want to keep hammering that message in, that we're continuing to raise for Frank's seat, and we want to see Frank go to space. So let's make it happen.
Send Frank to space. Go to moondao.com/Frank. You can make a donation of any amount to help the mission. You're joining the mission as an active, taking an active role to help govern the outcome of that mission, and potentially having the opportunity to accompany Frank to space, or to fly to space with Frank. But really, we want to see Frank go to space. Long overdue. Let's make it happen, folks. moondao.com/Frank. Send Frank to space.
And bring him back.
And bring him back. We got the video coming up right now, so I guess we can queue up with that. So
all right. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. See you next week.
Bye.
Our world is not in good shape. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that we, as the crew of Spaceship Earth, we're kind of doing a terrible job of being the crew.
All the astronauts say when they get up top, they're like, wait, what are we doing?
Yeah. But explain to me what the overview effect is.
It is absolutely gorgeous. Overview effect is when you're looking through that cupola, it's like the bay window looking down on the Earth, and you see just that, the Earth as it exists with the whole universe in the background. You see the thin blue line of the atmosphere, and then when you're on the dark side of the Earth, you actually see this very thin green line that shows you where the atmosphere is. And what you realize is every single person you know is sustained and inside of that green line, and everything else outside of it is completely inhospitable. You don't see borders, you don't see religious lines, you don't see political boundaries. All you see is Earth, and you see that we're way more alike than we are different.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
The Artemis mission illustrated the difference between surface thinking and overview thinking. Seen from the surface of the Earth, we perceive difference, division, conflict. But from above the surface, we perceive unity, oneness, interconnection, and cooperation. This is an inflection point where humanity has a choice between the two. And our decision will influence life on Earth and off-world for millennia.
When I think about Frank floating and experiencing Earth out the window of a spaceship, I am totally humbled by that.
Frank White is somebody who's devoted the last 30 plus years to not only explaining what the overview effect is, but more importantly, what the implications of that shift in perspective is for our planet.
We don't often think about the ripple effect of stuff that we do. So those of you thinking of supporting Frank, it's not just about him going to space, it's the ripple effect from that experience when he comes back. And that's why we should send Frank to space.
We're inviting people to go beyond making a contribution and join the mission. It won't just be a flight, but also support for bringing the overview effect down to Earth. So join us in sending Frank to space.
Send Frank to space! And bring him back.
It's time for us to fly Frank to space.
Let's get Frank to space.
Let's send Frank to space.
We're here to say, send Frank to space.
Send Frank to space! Send Frank to space!
Send Frank to space! Get Frank to space. Send Frank to space.
To engage in supporting the project of sending my friend Frank White into space.
Let's get this guy to space. Forget about me. Let's get Frank White to space. Tell them one more time. Let's send Frank to space.